Hi, everyone. Jeff Wren with the AABB. We're the Association for the Advancement of Blood and Biotherapies. We are a nonprofit professional association with a strong focus on quality. Today, I'm going to give you a little background on our association and then tell you how we are advancing quality for CGTs in the pharmacy setting. So a little background on AABB. We've been around for about 75 years. Our initial members were those involved in blood collection, transfusion medicine, blood banking. As the field has evolved into blood stem cell transplant, our membership evolved with it. We set standards through our membership in 1991 around cell therapy, collections, administration. Currently today, we've got a membership of 6,000 over 80 countries, and with the standards that our community develops, we've accredited about 1,300 facilities against those standards all across the world. We've been growing into the biotherapy space quite a bit over the last decade. Recently, we launched an individual credential called the Certified Advanced Biotherapies Professional Certificate. This is a validation of the test takers, the exam takers, understanding of the full biotherapy spectrum. So everything from the mechanism of the science behind these therapies, regulatory and quality considerations, as well as patient considerations as the therapies are being considered and administered. This is an exam that evaluates your understanding of this, and if you pass, you become credentialed. We also have a really strong publishing arm. So we recently just published a 12th edition of our cell therapy standards. Those came out last July. We put out a book around aseptic techniques, so really a primer on ensuring aseptic techniques. As more and more are getting into the field, we want to make sure that they have the education that they need to perform the task to optimal quality. We also have a scientific journal, Transfusion. We'll be putting out a special issue describing all the ways that AABB works in biotherapies. That should be out at the end of the year. But let's talk pharmacy. So as we know, the number of approved therapies is increasing, right? We're not accelerating as fast as maybe we thought we wanted to, but we are getting new approved therapies every few months. So those are still going. Our hypothesis about a year ago, which we're now turning into a proposition, is that the pharmacies are going to be increasingly involved in the dispensing of these therapies for a few reasons. So one, it's to reduce the financial risk. These are really high-value therapies once they become commercial. Many of the community hospital programs who are looking to administer these therapies cannot take on the liability of a few $250,000 products. We know many of the cell therapy labs in the major hospital settings have policies in place that say they can't have more than $500,000 or $1 million of inventory in at any time. But beyond reducing the financial risk, it's also improving community access. So we know many of these community centers that want to start admitting these therapies, they've got the clinical expertise. They don't have the infrastructure to be able to house and hold on to these therapies prior to dispensing. So that's where the pharmacies will be coming in. The problem, many of these drugs and medicines, the CGTs, aren't like the typical drugs that are being administered by pharmacies today, right? So these are living, personalized, unique cell therapies. We all know that. Pharmacies are just getting into the game. They don't have as much experience as all of us in handling these types of therapies. On top of that, the stakes are very high. Complex logistics, multiple stakeholders in the development and delivery of these products, and of course the patients are critically ill, and we need to make sure that when these patients need the products that they can access them. So what we did is we reached out to 10 of our pharmacy members who are really interested in getting into this space. They understand the landscape a little bit and said, you know, do you guys expect to be playing a larger role? No need to take a look at these survey results. The gist of it is 90% of the folks we spoke with, they strongly agreed that pharmacies are going to become more involved in the dispensing of approved cell and gene therapy products. But only 50% of them thought that the current standards that exist within accrediting pharmacies are adequate for handling these products. 40% said, no, they're not adequate. We need something. And 100% of those who responded said that they expect pressure from the manufacturers and the payer to have some sort of accreditation, qualification of the pharmacies to show that they can handle these products without damaging them, without any risk to the patients. After we surveyed the groups, we went out and spoke with a couple other pharmacy groups. They're really excited to get into this space, but again, they don't have the experience for this. They know that the products need to be stored under liquid nitrogen or maybe a -80. They know that if the freezer breaks, that's a problem, but they don't know what to do about that. How much redundancy do they need to build into the emergency planning? Do they just need a backup freezer? What types of alarms do they need? How do they communicate that up to the manufacturer, down to the clinical team? They really want to get into this space, but they don't know what they're doing. They don't have a playbook to address the unique requirements of CGTs. And we all know that this is going to increase risk, right? If there's a supply chain failure, even at the last mile, at the pharmacy level, that's not great. The data integrity issues, so as these are outcomes-based reimbursements from the payers, we need to make sure that we're monitoring and we're tracking all the documentation of the chain of custody, the chain of condition, all these products all the way through. And of course, there's patient safety risks if we don't do this right. So the solution to this, they didn't have a playbook, we decided to make one. So we just introduced last week the first edition of our CGT pharmacy standards. These were developed by a committee of AABB members with representation from the whole spectrum. We had specialty pharmacists from the academic programs who have experience with CGT, so think of the Children's National, the University of California system, as well as some of the folks attending this meeting, the retail pharmacies, Walgreens, CVS, as well as the specialty pharma distributors, the McKessons and Coras. We put them all into a room for 2 days. We locked them in and said, hey, here's how AABB builds their standards. Here's the quality framework. How would they apply in your setting? And we hammered out some really good standards that eventually went out for public comment. So there's a 90-day public comment. We got further feedback from a lot of the manufacturers, other pharmacy stakeholders who weren't in the committee. And then we went through FDA. FDA OTP sat in on the committee. We went back to FDA and said, hey, here's our final products for our first edition standards. And we received their blessing to say, hey, these are great. Good luck. To be specific, what these quality standards cover, it's really the processes around receiving these products, storing them, dispensing them appropriately, making sure that you've got the right agreements in place with your suppliers and the clinical teams. That's a quality consideration if you don't know who's liable for what. Of course, installing, validating equipment that would be used in the pharmacy setting, documentation, record retention is a huge deal in pharmacy. If you don't know about that, it's a pain in the butt. And then how to address any nonconformances. What do they do when something doesn't go as planned? So that's all in the standards, and we're really excited about that. We've been sharing it throughout this meeting, and I haven't heard from anyone that these are not needed, that this is a bad idea, that we wasted our time. They're going to be really well accepted by the community. So now we're moving on to accreditation. So AABB is part of our business. We develop standards within our community, and then we go out to these facilities and accredit them against these standards. So we're starting to accredit pharmacies. We've got 2 now in the pipeline who will be accredited against these standards. Again, we just kicked off last week. So it's a voluntary accreditation. We're not a punitive body. We can't do anything if you don't meet the standards. We want to make sure that you guys meet the level of quality that the community thinks is appropriate, but if you're not there, we'll help you get there. Again, really focus on the quality systems. And the way we wrote these standards, it's applicable to the specialty pharmacies at Moffitt, MD Anderson, Fred Hutch, to the retail pharmacies getting into this space that I previously described, the pharmaceutical distributors. There's a lot of specialty pharmacies that are popping up in this space specific to a gene therapy or specific to cell therapies. They're very interested in becoming accredited so that they can let their manufacturers know as they're responding to RFPs, as they're working with the clinical teams, that they've had a third-party validation of their quality system, and it's great. Again, reduces audit risks. Ensures that the product is going to be in the same condition coming into the pharmacy as it is while it's going to be dispensed. So we're really excited about that. We expect that we'll have a few dozen programs accredited within the next couple of years, and then we'll grow as the pharmacy groups become more involved. So again, I wanted to thank the committee that came together. This is the group that came in and that we locked in the room for 2 days. That we had a good time with setting these standards. You saw the McKesson folks speak during the week. The Walgreens and Cora folks are here, so if you see them, you can ask them about their participation in the standards development process. Pretty robust, but I think everyone had a good time. We ended up with a good product. And we're really excited to be able to extend our experience and knowledge in quality systems in general into these new types of players in the ecosystem. And we think it's going to be a value add for you guys as well as the patients and everyone involved. So with that, I want to say thank you and appreciate you. If you have any questions about the program, feel free to come find me after the talk or this afternoon. Thank you.